Hey, horror fans! Welcome to episode 76 of Funny Book Splatter, a horror comics podcast brought to you by HorrorTalk.com. I am your host, James Ferguson. This week, writer M.L. Miller returns to talk about the conclusion of Gravetrancers from Black Mask Studios. This has been a trippy and unpredictable read. No character is safe from this insanity. The fourth and final issue of Gravetrancers is due out on July 25th. You can find more from M.L. Miller at his official site, mlmillerwrites.com. He also has his own podcast called Spoiler Alert. In other news, the first volume of Long Lost from previous guest Matthew Erman and artist Lisa Sterle is now out in stores. This collects the first 6 issues of the series, so if you slept on this in single issues, you can pick it up now in trade paperback. On the Kickstarter front, past guest Mike Garley has returned with more Samurai Slasher. This time, it's a survive-your-own-adventure book. That's right, it's a horror version of the classic Choose-Your-Own-Adventure series. That's it for the news and updates. Now let's jump right into the show. Here is episode 76 of Funny Book Splatter with my guest, M.L. Miller.
Sounds good. So, how have you been, man?
Okay, chugging along. I've, been cranking out reviews lately. I don't know why, but I just got into this thing where I'm like, I'm gonna try to review as many books as I can in a given week, and I've started to keep track of them. Which is like, so I'm like, all right, I set like a record of like, okay, this is how many I did this week. Now I'm gonna try to do more. And
well, that's good. It's good to be motivated like that. I used to do that, but I mean, I'm still doing the reviews for films. And the Fantasia Film Festival is opening up this I think this week or next week. Mm-hmm. So, I'm getting some like links and things like that, and I'm committed to cover that, festival. But, it's like, I usually have only been able to do just like maybe about 5 or 6 reviews a week these days. So, it used to be I would do about maybe 20 films a week. And then some comic films as well. So I've reduced it significantly, but there's only so many hours in the day, and I've started to work and do other things as well. So it's hard to keep up with it all,
Yeah. And I say all that knowing that like, that's 1 week. Like, I could get, something could happen and I just like I lose like a day or something. Yeah. And it's just like, well, that's all gone. Yep. Like, it's like, and then now I'm behind again because Wednesdays keep coming. Uh-huh. Like, it's like those things just keep chugging along. It's just like, with every week, it's just fighting back this like tide of new books. And I know all that sounds dumb. It's like, I have too many comics to read.
I hear you. But it's just the way things are with comics and everything. Everybody wants like an immediate, like kind of, review, and you have to have it that week, otherwise it's almost pointless anymore. It's people have moved on to something else, or it's already been spoiled, or whatever.
Yeah, it's weird. That review life is tough. Yeah. But look, we're here to talk about Gravetrancers, so let's jump into this a little bit. So I'm excited to see your the 4th and final issue coming out. Yeah. That's so. First off, like, I have to compliment you on what is probably the most unpredictable series I've read all year. Because every time I think I know where this book is going, it's like, nope.
Well, I'm glad. Yeah. And I mean, that's really what I was trying to do. My initial intention was just trying to do, just something that's unpredictable and just really kind of have fun with it, with the narrative. And, you think you're going to be following one character, and then that something happens to that character, and you think this person's dead, and then this person isn't dead, and this person is dead, and all of this stuff. So it's really fun to kind of, play with expectations. And I think one of the things with a lot of horror in general, and this is movies and comics, I think they really are playing with what's expected a lot. And I feel that the only way, the movies that I like, and the books that I like, and the comics that I like, all of them are completely unexpected, and they take risks. They show me things that I don't want, that I didn't think I was going to see, or there are just little twists here and there that really stand out to me. So I really found that I as I was writing it, I was just trying to see where the conventional route would be going, and then all of a sudden just try to go a different direction with that. So I'm glad it was semi-successful for you. I'm glad you liked it.
So how did you, I guess, plot that out? Were you like, as you're writing, realize like, no, I could see this coming. I have to turn here.
There were some instances, yes. I definitely knew that in the first issue we would be threatening to lose our female antagonist, but I also knew I was going to be introducing another antagonist that was going to be kind of like I'm sorry, a protagonist, and that we threatened to kind of. It looked like that. It just looked like the main character was killed off, but then I introduced somebody new afterwards. So hopefully that kind of made people say, okay, well, this was all maybe the first 15 minutes of a movie, and now we're going to get the rest of the movie, and it's going to all take place in the graveyard. And then after that goes on, I wanted to kind of just keep on going with twists. So as I kind of plot out my series, what I do is I want to make sure that each one ends on a nice cliffhanger. I want to leave every issue with the reader kind of just wanting to really go and really look forward to the next issue. I hate it with things like Spider-Man. Spider-Man looks like he's about to fall off a building or whatever, and Spider-Man is going to live. But with a series like Gravetrancers, there is no like main character on the cover, so it kind of leaves it open to anybody can die at any given moment, or it being a horror thing, a horror story, something worse than death can even happen to anybody at any given moment. So that's really what I was planning on all along. So I had the ending definitely in mind right from the start. And then I went on and I kind of plotted these different little beats that happen at the end of each issue that hopefully keeps their attention going.
Mm-hmm. Well, actually, what I should have asked to start, just to refresh people, to remind them what Gravetrancers is. Can you give them like a quick elevator pitch, just so we can get everyone back on the same page?
Yeah. So, Gravetrancers is a horror story. It takes place in a graveyard. It follows a pair of siblings who basically are looking for their estranged father's grave. They each have their own kind of reason for doing that, and that kind of comes to fruition by the end of the whole series. But at the same time, when they get there, they realize that there's this whole kind of operation going on in the graveyard. That they're using the dead bodies as this kind of fuel for a drug, or the main ingredient for a drug that ends up having some pretty strong hallucinatory effects. And so it's done with a really talented artist named James Wynot. He has been just really churning out some really trippy effects and some really wild, just as the series went on, I just kind of pulled back a little bit and just said, hey, just go nuts with what these people see when they're hallucinating, and he really had a lot of fun with it, I could tell. So.
Oh yeah, dude, one of my questions was gonna be, who do I have to blame for these nightmares I'm gonna have with these images that come out of this book, because they're incredible.
Yeah, I mean, usually it just depends. I mean, it's the whole thing where you try to really get to know your artist and what they're capable of, and really build that trust. And I think that happens a lot with me. I've done quite a few comics, but not as many as most like of the professionals that are out there. So I'm pretty sure that that's going to be the same way with a lot of writers. I think they start out, they're a little bit more controlling, a little bit more hesitant to just let the reins go and let the artist go crazy with it. Especially if it's a new artist and you've never worked before, or you've never really seen their work that much. Or I could just be a total control freak, and that's just the way I am. And those who have worked with me probably can kind of attest to the fact that I do have a very specific story in mind. I have, when I see things, I see them very clearly in my head, what the scene is going to be like. So a lot of times I'm very specific with the way I describe a panel, but that kind of gets into a shorthand by the time the second or third issue comes along. And so any issues after that, it gets a lot easier, and I'm sure it gets a lot easier for the artists because they don't have to have me griping and bitching and moaning about things. So, but I think what I tell every artist at the beginning of us working together is that I'm just looking for the best product from both you and I, and this isn't any type of personal attack or anything. It's just us. I want this to look as good as it possibly can look, and so that's so at least we both know we're on the same page, that we both have that mutual respect. It's just that there are certain things that I like specifically, and there are certain and so that's what I go for. So and so in the first issue, I think that there is less hallucinatory stuff going on. But after I saw what James could do in that first issue, when some of the people started tripping out on these drugs, I was just so impressed with that, and also impressed with the colors that D. Cuniff kind of came up with during this entire thing. That, I mean, there were such psychedelic kind of really colors that popped off the page, and they really made, like, they brought out all these little details that I didn't even notice in some of these thick black and white inks that James turned in. So seeing those things happen was really, really great. It was really kind of magical to see the whole thing come together at the end.
Yeah, you said you had the final, the ending kind of all plotted out. Did the series change at all as you were working on it, to say, like, take those kind of unexpected turns as you were writing it?
A little bit. I always try to leave room. I think that I always try to have an ending in mind whenever I approach a project. Otherwise, I feel it ends up being really aimless. I've tried doing it the other way, where I'm like, I'm just kind of just writing issue to issue, and I'm thinking, it's all gonna wrap up at some time, and it'll come to me later.
That's how we got lost. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I definitely the way that it ends, it's a very bleak ending. There's no happy endings here in this book, but it does kind of resolve some issues that I think that were going on with the two main characters, Anthony and Maribel. I think that both of those guys were they really were put through the gauntlet in this kind of story. But by the end of it, they're both changed in sort of different ways, and in not good ways. I really felt that if you're dealing with an issue as strong as addiction and drug use and just that kind of addiction and those types of holes that kind of appear inside people's soul, that I do feel like it kind of a really happy, rosy ending with all of the everything kind of wrapped up nicely it's really a disservice to any person who's ever suffered from those sort of things. So I definitely wanted to kind of be a little bit more sensitive to that, but at the same time I wanted it to be as kind of real and cruel as it could be. So apart from the hallucinatory effects of the drugs and some of the stories that Maribel tells at the beginning of each of the issues, I did want to make this kind of rooted in the real world as much as I possibly could.
Wait, so you're telling me that the people didn't really smoke up, Birkenhair's ashes or something?
There were different. There are different stories that have gone on with a lot of that stuff. A lot of it is based on truth. I think that there were some places where I embellished a little bit to make it all kind of fit in the same universe, where just to kind of make it so that the hallucinations kind of worked and everything. But each and every one of those stories, they all really have a lot. I basically just looked up the effects of smoking human remains, and all of these different stories throughout history kind of showed up, and that's where I got a lot of my inspiration from that. So that was a lot of fun, just coming up, and it also helped kind of fuel what was it fueled the rest of the story, because it built the world around them, and it really made it so that I wanted this family to kind of function as not only as a well-oiled machine that has been kind of dealing with all of this stuff a couple of times, for quite a few years, but also I wanted to make it so that there was a logic to it. There was a kind of a historical impact to it as well.
It wasn't something that they necessarily discovered, but maybe they read about it and figured out their own way to mix it themselves.
Yeah, or they stumbled upon it just through necessity. It's one of those things where you end up getting because you're desperate, you end up desperate times call for drastic measures, or whatever that saying is. So I always felt that if I ever was able to kind of go back and do an origin story and talk about where the family kind of came up with all of this, and visit the patriarch of the family and see who that person was, and really try to kind of dissect the family. I definitely wanted to go into the reasons why someone would take such a drastic measure to do that sort of thing. And I think that through all of those little stories that happen at the very beginning, the little vignettes at the beginning of each issue, it does show that there's either a ritualistic way that made people do this, or a desperation sort of way of doing this, or just kind of a happenstance. Maybe it just happened, they kind of accidentally stumbled upon this sort of thing. So all of that is something that I would love to play with this world again. It all depends on how this is received, and what people think of the entire story once it's out there, how well it does in trade, and how well it is in sales and everything. That's always the indicator on whether there can be more.
And the way that the series wraps up, it seems like it's definitely, you close this door, you kind of are opening up a few windows to be like, well, these are other things that you could still continue on. This world isn't there isn't a big the end at the end of it. It's and that's all that will ever happen in this series. So having that open certainly helps.
Yeah, it does. I kind of always build a back door into all of my stories, just in case. You just never know. I wouldn't want to just all of a sudden blow up everything, and then someone comes along, and then I have to really work really hard to kind of get myself out of this really definite ending that I've put in there. But at the same time, it's a really it's a tough tightrope to walk, because you do want to make it feel like there's a resolution that happens that isn't going to be disappointing, that makes it feel like, oh, they just left it open and nothing will ever happen again, and it's a really kind of an ending that just doesn't please anybody in itself. So yeah, it's a tough tightrope to walk, but it does work. I think this one works this way. At least we've told Maribel and Anthony's story. Maybe there's more to that story, maybe there's not, but it all depends. I definitely love all of those characters. The family is just a fun group of creeps that I love playing with as well. Definitely inspired by Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Devil's Rejects and things like that. But I also wanted to kind of make them unique and iconic on their own, and hopefully I did that by the end of the series.
Certainly, their own special breed. Whereas you could see they might be distant relatives of the family from Texas Chainsaw Massacre, or the people under the stairs or something. They're their own special breed of insanity there. It's just it's almost tough to describe, because like I said, every time I thought I knew, okay, this is what these people are about, you would uncover some other room in their house and it's full of something weird, or it's like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre family. It's like the family in that X-Files episode Home. It's all of the weird shit. Though it's that weird down home family where it's they're too close and they're just up to weird shit. and it's like, this is uncomfortable and strange, and like we don't like everything about this like should send up red flags to be like, we should not be here, turn around. Like, do you really need to see your dad's grave? Maybe just come back during the daytime, like, you know?
Yeah. And in that first issue, I really tried to address that as much as I could. I mean, you had to get Anthony and Maribel into that graveyard so that they were kind of thrown into this world. And I tried to make it so that they were racing there to get there before dark, so that they wouldn't have to be there in dark. And they mentioned that. Even when they drive up, they say, "Oh, this is creepy. I don't want to be here. Let's just turn around now." And as they're walking through the graveyard at the end, and it's dark all around them, they were like, "All right, this is stupid. Let's turn around and leave." But every time they get a notion like that, something happens to kind of keep them kind of moving forward into this sort of abyss that, it was in a believable way. I definitely feel like, I worked really hard because I'm the first one when I'm watching a horror movie and someone makes a stupid decision, I'm the first one that goes, "Come on, where is your brain?" I mean, as badly written as some of these horror movies are, they're still human beings, and no human being would make these sort of decisions. But I wanted to make it so that the circumstances really didn't allow it for them to kind of leave. And once they got to one kind of barrier and they crossed it, they would go a little further, and then they realized that there was no turning back by the end of it all. So that's what I was going for.
Once they got to a certain point, it's like, yeah, there's no like normal now. It's like, you know, you have to just turn into that skid of insanity, and it's like it's either, you know, you could blow the house up by this point to get out, or it's like you just have to kind of see where this rabbit hole takes you, you know?
Yeah. And I mean, a lot of it has to do with just the fact that very early on, I had a lot of relatives kind of pass away when I was a kid. And unfortunately, I went to a lot of funeral homes and graveyards as a kid, and in your mind as a kid, you kind of see these back rooms. I remember that there was one funeral that my brother and I were at, and we were really young, and we were wandering around the funeral home, and we get into this weird back room that we know we weren't allowed to be in, and there's this open casket with another corpse that we didn't even know who it was. It wasn't one of our relatives or anything, but it was just sitting there in this creepy room, and we were like, oh my God, we were so creeped out. But we were just kind of adventurous and looking around the entire place, and really having a good time, just kind of having the best time in a shitty situation. As I think we were like 10 and 8, my brother and I were. And so just to be able to kind of do that, and then I went home and went to bed, and then all of that swirls around in your head, like, what goes on? How many other secret rooms are in this funeral home, and what else do they have there, and what do they do with the bodies, and what do they do on a day when no one dies, and there's just stuff, you know, there's other stuff going on, and regular life going on. Do they live there? Like, what? Mm-hmm. All of that stuff. I saw it as a funeral home, meaning that the people probably lived there somewhere in the home there. So all of that was, I definitely think that had something to do with the way this story kind of fell into place. It dealt with a lot of those childhood blanks that I kind of filled in through the years as thinking about, okay, maybe they have a secret room full of just random shit that they stole from graves for the last 100 years, and maybe there's a machine gun in there. Maybe there's, you know, that scene where he goes into that room and she finds, and the Ma'am Malort, the matriarch of the whole family, when she goes in there, I really told James to just have fun with it. Let there be Egyptian sarcophagus in there. Let there be like a motorcycle and a crate full of dildos. Yeah. You know, all this like different kind of
it's like that warehouse at the end of Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark, right?
Every weird thing that anyone has ever asked to be buried with is all in there. It's like there's a saxophone, there's a guitar, there are all kinds of different things. But and I figured that would be something that if you lived in a graveyard and you were looting the bodies, you would amass this kind of arsenal sort of thing that you have in your house. So, what better time to unleash that arsenal rather than when the police kind of descend upon your graveyard. So, but yeah, all of that scene, all of that stuff, the way the family works together and the way they kind of function, it was all bouncing around in my head for a long time. So I got a lot of those ideas that were just kind of stuck in there out in this series. So I got to come up with brand new ones now. So that's the real.
Well, I can only imagine what your Google search history must look like with all the research.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm probably on many FBI lists right now. I'm sure.
So I mean, how did this story come about then from you, like, piecing together all these different things and going like, okay, well, like, maybe this can go here, this can go here, and then all of a sudden, like, you stitch together this, like, Frankenstein's monster of a story, but it still had this main thread of smoking dead people?
Yeah, I think that once I got the smoking dead people part down, and I knew it was going to take place, and I got the location down, I wanted the graveyard to be a character in the series. Once I got that's when I started kind of populating that world. I wanted to make a story, a personal story about a brother and sister kind of coming together, and dealing with death and how they deal with death in a specific way. As much as it's about, making drugs from dead people, it's also about just trying to understand death and how everyone has their own sort of understanding of it and how everybody has their own reaction to it. That's unique. And that's definitely based on my brother and I think just going through that at a very young age and how we've grown up to be very different people. And so going off of that was a lot of stuff to kind of play with. So really it's just, how can I put these two characters now through as much hell as possible now till the end of it. I did have a close friend that went through rehab, and I talked with him quite a bit about just what it was like to go through rehab, what it was like to admit he had an addiction, and also just to kind of go and fight it every day and seeing that struggle sort of every day. So that was definitely a part of it as well. So I definitely think that there are a couple layers to this one as far as the construction of it. But also I love those movies. I love Texas Chainsaw Massacre. As bad as the latter sequels are, I still love the family aspect to it. I would love to see a Texas Chainsaw Massacre that just focuses on the family, like a family reunion sort of movie.
What their average day is like when they're not killing people, what are they doing?
Yeah. I think there was a missed opportunity in the last, well, not the last one, but the one, I think it was Texas Chainsaw 3D, where the girl finds out that it was Alexandria Daddario. She finds out that she's actually related to this family, and she comes home and she goes and she realizes that she's inherited this house and Leatherface along with it, with this whole thing. I don't know if you've seen that one or not, but I think that there's something about just family and just the fact that you don't choose your family, that you're in this family and there are freaky members of your family and there are different aspects of it, but somehow you all get together and you all get together on like holidays and get along for a couple of hours or you don't, but you end up not getting along for a couple of hours and then you meet again that next year or the next family thing. I think that definitely interested me as I definitely didn't want to do a dinner scene that has been kind of done to death in a lot of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre type movies. But, I wanted to really amp that aspect of family because I think that's as much as it's about Anthony and those guys, Anthony and Maribel, I think that it's also about, the Malorts and how their whole family were, they're tied together and they suffer loss as well. And they have had tragedies. I mean, Shovel's a very tragic character. like all of these guys are very flawed characters. There's some weird happenings between Godfrey and his mother. There's all kinds of weird different things going on where but it makes them kind of, as odd as they are, it makes them more real, I think, just in the way they interact with each other. One of my favorite scenes, and it's a small scene, but it's just when the police do descend on the place. Ma'am Malord is kind of looking out of the house over the cemetery, and she sees the police descend on the graveyard, and it's definitely everybody's going to battle stations, but she just basically tells Godfrey to do one thing, she tells Shovel to do another thing. Pryber, who's in the back of the cemetery, he does another thing. So all of them know their roles and they all play their parts. And it's really a well-oiled machine that they're able to kind of do this. They have prepared for this. They know what to do, and that's that kind of what happens for the rest of that third issue there when everything goes to hell.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Like the family dynamic, not only on the creepy the Malork side of it, but with Maribel and was it Antonio and Anthony? Sorry,
Anthony,
that brings that kind of like normalcy to it. It's like on the one hand, all right, that gives you your kind of MacGuffin to get them in there, but it's that link of like, well, this is clearly all they have left is each other, and the fact that it's underlined by the fact that they're going to go see the grave of their father. It helps them kind of it helps unite them in the beginning, but also just give them something else to root for instead of just, well, I got to get out of this place alive.
Yeah, and I think that I definitely wanted there to be some type of personal resolution to both of them. Now Anthony's is really twisted and it's messed up, and I think that I think that Maribel basically has dug herself into a literal hole so badly that was the only place she could go by the end of the entire book. But I think that it also does stress how much how important family is to the both of them, and what they'll do in order to kind of keep that all together. It feels like to me it felt like both of them had put this off, seeing their dad, for a very long time. And it was long overdue for them to do this. And so, they had were both on their last kind of gasp of this is what they wanted to do. And hopefully this is the thing that they could do to get their lives together rather than have it fall apart. But, that's might not be the way it ends up.
So the shitty interview question is like, well, now that the 4-issue series is up, what's next on the plate? Like what else do you have up your sleeve?
Oh, hopefully there's an amusement park for Gravetrancers.
Hey man, stranger things have happened. I mean, there are weirder amusements out there.
No, I would love that. That would be cool. If someone actually dressed like Shovel one time, and I actually saw, at a signing or something.
Oh, so you haven't seen any cosplay yet?
Not yet, but I haven't really been to too many cons this year yet. So maybe there will be a Shovel cosplayer out there, or
it's not that,
or maybe not. Hopefully not Godfrey with his robe open.
Yeah, well, it's not. I mean, Shovel at least is not that hard to pull off. So I feel. I mean, obviously, like if they pull the handkerchief away, it's a little different. But that's something that I feel like people that are into the series could easily jump in there.
Definitely, yeah. And I mean, I wanted to have. I gave some basic descriptions to James when I first came up with the looks, but I also wanted him to have fun with it and really play with not only the look, but also like body shape and just what their function is. I wanted Shovel to be very sinewy and kind of, he's that kind of really kind of skinny, scrawny guy, but he's somehow really strong. He does nothing but physical stuff all the time, so that's what Shovel was. Pryber was just more of like, he's more like a cool goth guy that, you would just, you'd see that, you would see that guy kind of, and you might cross the street to kind of get away with it, get away from just because he might kick your ass, but you might have seen that guy before. And Godfrey, I just wanted him to be basically, I wanted him to have just as much as penetrating eyes as possible. Just very inappropriate, very inappropriately flirting, inappropriately just kind of saying things that just makes people cringe, and then also doing a lot of things that made people cringe. And I definitely tried to make Godfrey have at least one moment in each issue where he does some type of cringeworthy sort of thing. So it probably doesn't top the whole toilet licking scene, but in the first issue. But I definitely wanted to keep that going with him, just to give him something to make everybody kind of shake a little bit every time.
Was there anything that like you felt was like, nah, this is like too far?
I think that I was really playing with the idea of not showing what was going on under Shovel's little mask thing that he had. That was something that I was thinking about doing, and I think that there should have been I think the reveal was done well, and James did it really well. He actually this was by the second issue. He said, "Oh, we got to have a big reveal where someone pulls off his mask." And I was like, yeah, I know, but I don't know if I really want to do that. I would like to kind of keep it a mystery. But then again, I think that would have been disappointing to some people. You want to see that sort of gore sometimes. There's always a big moment in like a Friday the 13th movie when Jason gets his mask torn off and you see his face. And so I wanted to give that moment. I fought with the idea of having the epilogue in there and opening it up to a bigger world and just ending on the really bleak note. But I ended up going with the epilogue at the end just because I thought that kind of having because I didn't want to end it without the notion that there were ramifications outside of the graveyard. I wanted it to kind of... The suggestion would be that if we did a second series, not only would I go into the past, but I would also go into beyond the graveyard and really find out what that, does it become addictive? Does it become the next huge street drug that everybody becomes addicted to? And what does that mean? And what kind of effects does that do to, the population outside once it gets out of the hands of the people in the graveyard? It feels like it's a very contained operation there, at the graveyard. But once it goes beyond those walls, you no longer have control over it. And I think that would definitely be a theme that I would want to play with. And so that's when I decided to say, okay, well, we'll have that alley scene where we see that this is something that's hitting the streets, and it might be new on the streets, but it's hitting the streets soon, and it's going to be out there. But it was also a nod to, I don't know if you ever saw that movie, The Stuff.
The Stuff? No, I haven't seen that one.
It's a Larry Cohen movie. It's basically a Blob story, but it was a take on yogurt, in the 80s, and it became, it was, basically this stuff that was, it was yogurt. It was like a yogurt craze, but it was very addictive, and it ended up hollowing you out, and you end up being made of the stuff. And so at the end of it, they finally outlawed the stuff, and they thought they destroyed all the stuff. But at the end, there's this little scene where there's this back alley, and this guy comes up and goes, "Hey man, you got the stuff?" And the guy opens up his thing, and he's got this, it's actually called The Stuff, and it's in a little yogurt container. And so it's one of those things where it's like, you've seen a million horror movies. It's a trope, but still it makes it kind of fun. And even though I try to be unexpected, you also want to kind of tick off those trope marks as well.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Well, it's like paying tribute to like, to things like The Stuff then in that case.
Yeah.
And plus it makes it really like a chilling idea, because like, this was scary enough controlled with that family, but yeah, the thought of it being out there, and then like, you have things like meth labs out there now, but now it's like, it's a whole different kind of grave robbing in that case, of people trying to like, steal dead bodies or kill people just so they can smoke them up.
Yeah, and I definitely think that as much as I love the idea of the family, I would have to move on from the family a little bit, or maybe make it about just the family really fighting for creative control over this sort of new drug, and that it becomes a little bit more of like a Breaking Bad situation. So, I mean, there are a lot of places I would love to go with it. Right now, I'm not sure what's going to happen with it. I would love to write another series about it, but it's all up to whether people like it and want to see more. I've talked with Matt Pizzolo quite a bit about what I want to do next. I do have another series coming out, hopefully either later in this year or early next year, from Black Mask. And it's going to be a little bit of a different sort of take. It's more of a Twilight Zone sort of semi-political sort of story that I've never really dealt with. I always try to keep my stuff a little bit more metaphorical. But this idea that I ran past Matt, he liked it a lot, and so I am going to be doing that next. It should be interesting to see what happens, but it'll be more of a almost science fiction, but more of like it's a world outside your window, and all of a sudden something happens, and the world is changed because of one sort of little incident. So. Yeah, that's about as cryptic as
I mean, one benefit of the strange political climate we're living in right now is that it seems to be kind of ample playing ground for a lot of creative types to write crazy ass stories. A lot of inspiration.
Definitely, and I think that politics. I try not to get into politics because I feel like no matter what you say about politics, you're gonna really piss off somebody, and that's why I've kind of stayed away from it. I usually don't post any political stuff. I usually kind of just keep my stuff pretty like self-contained in their own little worlds. They're either graveyards or circuses or jungles or things like that. I think that some of the best stories. I go back and watch those old Twilight Zone shows, and they're still relevant now. And they talk about the human condition, and they talk about just really horrors that can kind of be produced just by the society that we live in. And a lot of people were upset about the last election, but I have told people to kind of rest assured, because we all look back on the 80s as this prosperous time for horror. And it was like a golden age for horror for me. I loved, and I think that in times like this, horror kind of thrives. And so at least we can have some awesome horror, TV shows and movies and stories that hopefully can come from this kind of turbulent times, So I guess that can be a small solace for what's going on out there.
There should be some pretty great great horror stories coming out and across all mediums then.
Yeah, and I mean I've actually tried to I'm actually talking to a couple of people about writing just an essay about what the horror movies meant in the 80s and how that has evolved through the years. But you look at the Friday the 13th movies, and that was a direct correlation to the difference between the old and the new, the more conservative kind of way of looking at things about sex and drugs and all of that stuff, and the and how authoritarian sort of person would deal with that sort of thing. And so that I definitely think that those times I don't think we're returning to those times, but I think it's evolving in really interesting ways. And I think that it's ways that I hope Black Mask will let me ask those questions, because they're a lot of fun. There's a lot of fun fodder out there to play with right now. All you have to do is just basically watch the news every day, and you see so many ideas for horror stories.
If anyone's going to do it, it's going to show up on Black Mask, undoubtedly.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. I love that company. I've been around. I've been friends with Matt for years, and I've said this before. It's like I've had pitch after pitch thrown out from that place, but every now and then something comes along and I'll throw it to Matt, and Matt likes it, and we put something together. So we've got a third one coming out here soon, so I'm looking forward to that. And I'm pitching around to different places. I have one that I have. It's more of a straight up horror story with not as much of a societal or kind of political bent to it. So I just don't think it would be a good fit at Black Mask. But I do think that I've talked to a couple of people, so hopefully it'll be showing up soon. But that'll be more of a classical Southern Gothic kind of horror story, which I love that sort of the atmosphere of just something going on in this like a plantation kind of place that's all kinds of dangers and creepy things going on.
It sounds it sounds like you're gonna have a lot of horror stuff coming, which is awesome.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not gonna do it. I mean, I have like other ideas that I would love to do other things, like some sci-fi stuff. Love to do superhero stuff, but horror is always going to be someplace that I always go back to. So that's what I'll keep on.
Well, your work is near and dear to my cold dead heart.
Thank you so much.
If with the genre, do you have like a favorite horror movie or like a go-to where it's like someone's like, I don't know if I like horror movies, and then you give them like, no, watch this. Do you have something like that?
Oh, I think the classics, The Thing. I think that is one that's like a universal kind of horror movie that everybody can kind of appreciate and really appreciate for not only the scary aspects of it and the paranoia that comes up, but also just the effects are so amazing. The original John Carpenter's The Thing. I love the 1970s version of Invasion of the Body Snatchers. I think that movie, the level of paranoia that goes on in that one as well is fantastic. I really love that what they do with, I mean, it's just a fantastic cast with everybody from Donald Sutherland to Jeff Goldblum and Leonard Nimoy is in there, and there's so many different actors in there that are just fantastic. The Shining is great. Everybody loves The Shining though, except Stephen King. I think that there are movies that those are the ones that I would go to and just say, you've got to go and you've got to see those. But at the same time, I see a lot of horror movies in my just weekly kind of day-to-day stuff. And when I do that, I kind of take, I see one cool thing in one little area of a movie, or one specific kill or one specific aspect of a monster or one specific jump scare. And that makes the movie for me. Things like, I love Motel Hell. I love Basket Case. The original Basket Case is an amazing movie. Things like that are always going to be near and dear to my heart. But Texas Chainsaw Massacre, of course.
What about like one that's more of like an underrated one, where it's like maybe one that's like, oh, people might not have heard of this, but they should see this.
There's a movie called The Last Shift that's on Netflix that I love.
Oh, is that the one with I think I've seen that. That's the one with the woman who's at the police station, right?
Yep. Oh. There's a woman at a police station, and the police station is closing down, and it's a haunted police station. I really like that one. There was a movie called The Devil's Candy, that I think that's on Netflix as well. And that's got Ethan Embry in it. And the big guy with the twitchy eyes. I always forget his name.
No.
But he's a big guy with twitchy eyes, and he's a serial killer who hears voices that might be from the devil. And Ethan Embry and his wife inherit a house, and this guy gets kicked out of the house by the state because his parents die. But he comes back to the house thinking that he still lives there, and so that's a creepy one.
No, I'm gonna have to see that. It's funny. So last shift, my editor Steve and I did this. We never got this podcast off the ground, but it was this idea that I would give him a horror comic to read, he would give me a horror movie to watch, and then we'd come back and talk about
Cool.
it. The last one that we didn't get to record was my assignment was to watch Last Shift, so I had watched it. So
Okay.
I still have, like, this was at least a year or two ago now. I still have all these notes in my email about, like, this is what I have to talk to him about this movie, because I think I wanted to just call it, like, if I had to retitle it, it would have been like, oh fuck no, the movie, because, like, every time she turns around, I'm like, nope, like, like, why?
Yeah.
Why is this happening? Get the fuck out of there.
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah, she definitely stays in that police station a lot longer than anyone else should or could or would have done that. But then there would have been no movie. So,
yeah.
But I just love the imagery in that movie, and I think that did a really good job with that. As far as maybe a little bit older, or like, I don't know if you've seen Motel Hell, but that's a really great movie. It's another crazy family cannibal movie. At the end, there's this chainsaw fight with a guy wearing a pig mask over his face, and he's fighting another guy. He's fighting a sheriff with a chainsaw. So it's very much like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but a little bit more of a comedy. Let me think of one more, maybe a little bit more recent. I really like this movie called They Look Like People, which is a really low budget movie.
I've seen that.
It's basically about a guy just that he becomes very paranoid. He thinks people are being replaced by aliens.
Pat Shand had recommended that to me. After speaking to him on the show. So yeah, I remember it. I like the kind of horror that, like, when you have that kind of unreliable narrator where it's like he might be right, but he also, there's like a good chance he's wrong. And like either way, it's horrible. So, like, if he's wrong, he's gonna murder somebody. If he's not wrong, then it's like, all right, there's a bigger problem here, and aliens are gonna devour us or something.
Yeah, and I do think that one, it's a very low budget movie. So there are some kind of low budget aspects to it that might turn some people off. But I think if you're a horror fan, you try to look past that. The low budget stuff, the aspects of it, or at least you try to look past it for the, I would rather see big ideas that are attempted than, just cliches that are done over and over again.
Yeah. That's a really good point.
Yeah. And I think that movie does that really well. But there's a lot of them. I really like the stuff that Mike Flanagan is doing, with Oculus, and, he did Ouija, the sequel to Ouija, and, he did Hush. He's done and I think he did, Gerald's Game, and he's going to be doing Dr. Sleep. So he's making bigger and bigger movies. Gerald's Game was the Stephen King, thing on Netflix, and I think Dr. Sleep, the sequel to The Shining, I think he's directing that as well. So he's going a lot of places. But I just rewatched Oculus the other day, and I love that movie. I think it's a really, really great film.
Cool. All right, Mark. I mean, this is awesome. Again, like, I'm glad that we had a chance to do this kind of like post-mortem on Gravetrancers. To kind of wrap up, it looks like the final issue comes out on July 25th.
Yes, it does, and I believe that's the exact same time that there's another book that's coming out with the exact same kind of premise, but that's that happens in comics.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's funny. It's like I was thinking about this before. I'm like, this poor guy. I mean, like, Mark Miller steals his name. You got Cullen Bunn taking his book. Like, what's gonna happen next, man?
I don't know. Someone's gonna take my life. Yeah, it's just gonna be a full on pod person kind of. Somebody's just gonna take everything from me, I guess. But it's okay. I mean, Cullen Bunn's book, Bone Parish, it's coming out. If you like some of the aspects of my book about smoking corpses and making drugs from corpses, I guess that's what that book is about. And I think that it's you can explore it in many different ways. Mine takes place in Chicago. His takes place in New Orleans. So there's going to be a little bit of a difference of a cultural kind of way of looking at it. So I'm looking forward to reading it because I just want to see what his ideas are about the whole thing. So hopefully maybe somebody will actually read both and they'll do a comparison and see. But who knows?
I'll be reading both, so I'll let you know.
Yeah, I mean, he's a great writer. I don't want to even think that I'm in the same like kind of echelon as he is, but yeah, it was when I read that I was like a little shocked, but oh well, that's the biz.
Well, yeah, but fortunately, you got out there first, so if anything, it's like you were first to market.
I beat you to it, yeah. Yeah.
All right, and then best places to find you online.
I write still. I do some horror reviews. I don't do as much as I used to, but I still try to keep it updated at mlmillerwrites.com. I do have a Patreon for ML Miller Writes there, just to kind of help me get my stuff out there. And I'm going to start updating that with as far as places to or things to get with that. Like, I don't know, I want to offer up some things like I'll kill you in one of my comics, or or some scripts or things like that, just some incentives. And also I take part in a podcast with JD Korejko and Rob Patey. Both of them, we used to work at Ain't It Cool News together. We don't work there anymore, but we still do our podcast called Spoiler Alert, and we cover comics every now and then, and we do a semi-weekly sort of podcast where we just kind of goof off and talk the whole time and babble.
Yeah.
Kind of like what I did now today. Except,
no, this is all good. Like you're on topic. You're on point. We're all set there. So Mark, thank you again. This was a blast again. Gravetrancers number 4 comes out July 25th, but that kind of does it then for this episode of Funny Book Splatter. I have been James Ferguson with my guest, ML Miller. You've been listening to Funny Book Splatter, a horror comics podcast brought to you by HorrorTalk.com. We've been bringing you the best in horror since 2002. In addition to comics, we cover movies, TV shows, books, and video games. We've got news, reviews, guest features, interviews, unboxing videos, and much more. Be sure to sign up to Steve's Deals newsletter to increase your horror collection without breaking the bank. Check us out at HorrorTalk.com and at HorrorTalk on Twitter.